بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وعلى كل من تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. Respected brothers and sisters, Alhamdulillah, all praises for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that today we have gathered for on a very unique occasion, for a very unique purpose. It's a book launch, but as you know that the title for today's event is An Evening of Knowledge, which is actually very significant because having a book launch in itself as a objective or goal, it's something that's maybe debatable or disapproved of. It's a means, it should actually be a means. I remember recently Azhar Academy had a book launch of the translation of the Quran by my respected teacher Mufti Uthmani Hafidhahullah, where he mentioned something very intriguing, ironic, and something very important, significant for us to remember. He said that a lot of times, in history we have many books written by many ulama, many scholars, many muhaddithun and fuqaha and jurists, but never have we seen a book launch. Imam Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, radiallahu anhu, one of the great historians and muhaddith, a great scholar, many books he compiled. Some scholars have, they divided the amount of pages he compiled and distributed these pages over the days of his life. And from the time he reached puberty till the time he passed away, over 80, 90, 100 pages a day he compiled, let alone reading them. He wrote them. For us it's difficult to even read 80 pages a day. But no one book was launched. So Shaykh Taqi Uthmani mentioned that many scholars had books written but they did not launch them. And he quoted Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, one of the four Imams, that he wrote his book Al-Muwatta, which is famous. Somebody came and said to him that, "Oh Imam, other people are imitating you and they are also writing Muwattas," because a lot of people started writing their own versions of Muwatta. He said, "Ma kana lillahi yabqa." That book which is written for the sake of Allah will remain. That which is written and compiled for the sake of Allah, for the pleasure of Allah, that will be everlasting and that will remain. And it happens so. Today we only hear the Muwatta of Imam Malik and all the other Muwattas that were compiled in the time of Imam Malik. We don't hear about them. So a book which is written for the sake of Allah, for the pleasure of Allah, because ultimately a Muslim, his objective is to please God and please Allah, that's it. And no other objective in mind. If a book is compiled for that reason, then in itself it becomes launched. Allah will launch it. Nevertheless, having a book launch is not a problem. It's something, the reason being behind that, as Shaykh Taqi mentioned, that why he accepted to have a book launch was that a gathering like this is a means. A book launch is a means of, number one, of the circulation of knowledge. Like today we'll hear all the speakers inshallah talking about the various books and the Imams who compile those books. We learn about them. It's a means of gaining knowledge, and then it's also a means of people coming to know about these books so that then they buy them, they read them, they learn about the authors and they learn something from the books, and then they just don't stop there but they carry on and they learn more and more knowledge, read more books and study with scholars. So it is in this context we should understand today's program, that it's not just a book launch but it's an evening of knowledge where our intention should be to seek some knowledge. I don't want to delay too long inshallah. With this in mind, today we have great speakers, great scholars who have come, authors of the books, and inshallah we'll introduce each speaker as the speaker comes along and certain points that I want to discuss inshallah. So the first speaker today we have is, do you have the itinerary with you? No. I think the first speaker we have is Professor James Piscotri, who is from the University of Oxford. This book, which is Madrasah Life, and I will talk about Shaykh Akram when he comes to give his lecture, a student's day at Nadwatul Ulama. Professor James, he wrote a foreword to this book, and he is a fellow at Wadham College, Oxford, senior tutor of the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies. He's the author, among other publications, of Islam in a World of Nation States and co-editor of Muslim Travelers, Pilgrimage, Migration and the Religious Immigration. He formerly taught at the University of Wales and Johns Hopkins University and is an editor of several journals in Islamic studies. So he has a good knowledge of Islamic studies and the various Islamic books. With this, I call upon Professor James.
Thank you, Mufti Muhammad. Thank you, Sheikh. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for this invitation. I'm delighted to be here, and I want to thank the Al-Azhar Academy and Turath Publishing for inviting me. I think it's as the Mufti has said, I think it's a very important occasion for all of us. And it's certainly important for someone such as myself outside the community. I've read the book, and I know its greatness, and I'm happy here to commend it to you. It's a particular privilege for me to speak at the launch of this book by my friend and colleague, Dr. Muhammad Akram Nadwi. I will embarrass him by saying, which is the truth, he is a model of engaged scholarship, a man who knows the principles and the traditions of Islam with great learning. He displays this learning without ostentation, with humility, but he writes about it with unquestioned authority. Over the years, I've learned more from this one distinguished individual with his quiet demeanor and his unpretentious scholarship, more than I've learned from all the books of Orientalist scholarship. But no one should assume that this sort of gentle and unassuming scholarship should be taken for granted. Gentle and humble as he is, he's certainly not lazy or inactive. Indeed, he puts me to shame. These are just some of his recent books. He puts me to shame by the number of works that he produces in Urdu, Arabic, English, no less, on all aspects of Hadith, fiqh, Islamic history. You know, this is an industrial strength scholar. This is someone who produces and produces well. And I'm very impressed in a sense that I have him as a colleague in order to be able to learn from him. I hasten to say that I get no commission from the sales of the books, but I'm still delighted to endorse it nevertheless. I think that you perhaps should look at it very carefully, and I encourage you to read it. The publishers, Turath Publishing, have beautifully produced a work, I think, of great charm and subtlety, for which I congratulate them. Well, if I might make a few comments generally, which are suggested by the book and perhaps more broadly, I think that the publisher and the author have given us, above all, a timely and an important corrective to popular misperceptions of a traditional institution in Islam, one which is traditional, but also one which is modern. The madrasa has attracted considerable attention, even notoriety, since the unsettling events of September 11th. And you know that it's widely believed, particularly among Western policymakers, that these schools and colleges are the training ground for radical activities and directly sustain terrorist activities such as Al-Qaeda. No one a decade ago would have anticipated that a traditional educational institution such as this would have occupied a central place in the discussions between the President of the United States and the President of Pakistan. But this is exactly what occurred in February 2002, when President Bush, in a sense, lectured the Pakistanis about the need for a modern, quote-unquote, educational system that trains children in basic sciences and reading and maths and the history of the Islamic world. President Musharraf conceded that although madrasas provide an important social welfare function, lodging and training the poor in particular, their weakness, in his words, lies in quote-unquote religious teaching. He assured the president that fundamental reforms to the curriculum would follow, reforms which would emphasize science, mathematics, English, and would allow madrasa students to be brought, quote, into the mainstream of life, unquote.